Hi everybody. I hope you're having a good day today. And right here, the weather's cooperating. It's a little chilly, but still, it's very nice, sun shining and getting along. Anyway, hope your day's going good. And just remember, this is the day the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. It's a wonderful time to sit back and just read Psalm 100, the 100th Psalm. It's a beautiful, comforting psalm. And you can also take this opportunity to realize you have an opportunity to do something for God. And so we don't want to neglect our duties. We have several duties as Christians, and if you're not a Christian, you need to know what your duties would be if you become one. And so we don't want to neglect those duties. And so that brings us to our lesson, the result of neglect. And we have depending on where you live, you might have this, but in some places I know there's a lot of things around that are broken down pieces of junk. Where I used to live, there was a lot of houses that were in need of being torn down because they really do present a hazard to the community. And a house that is not lived in will break down and collapse upon itself in a few years, whereas a house that is lived in will last a long time. And so what we see is the result of neglect. We drive around and see the results of neglect everywhere. See, if you neglect your garden, weeds will take over. If you neglect your homework, your grades will go down. And you may have to repeat the same courses because of your neglect. When politicians neglect their duty, things stay the same or get worse for so many people. And I'm sure we all realize what happens when a child is neglected. And most of them are usually end up in prison or do something else, and they learn to neglect their own kids if they have any. So what if you neglect to change the oil for your vehicle maintenance? Sooner than later, your car will cease working as it should, and that could be very costly. See, neglect can be very costly. We realize that. See, putting off seeing a doctor can have bad results for your health. If you think something's wrong, get it taken care of right away and don't put it off, because it could get worse, possibly to the point that the doctor could not reverse the damage. So yeah, check that out. And neglect causes that. See, replacing a car engine is very expensive, and really, not taking care of your house can become or cause big time expenses as well. And neglecting your duties can cause you to lose your job. So, I mean, yeah, we're talking money here and your livelihood, so maybe you're going to start paying attention. So we see these things in the material and physical world, and we understand how things operate in real life. We know the consequences of neglect. And we consider anyone a fool to neglect something that requires maintenance. Yet somehow, this world seems to get along by neglecting the most important thing of all. So let us consider our soul and the result of neglect. See, if you neglect the truth, you will lose your soul. And that's true. And this is nothing new. People do it all the time. They were doing it back in the Old Testament days. Amos wrote about there's a famine in the land, a famine of truth. In other words, people weren't learning what they needed to learn, and that's going to destroy them. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." And so when you neglect your soul, you neglect these other things as well. See, if you neglect the truth, you'll lose your soul. If you neglect Bible study, you become a breeding ground for the devil's lies, and you will fall for anything, whether it is truth or not. If you neglect going to church on a regular basis, you are just what Satan is looking for the recruit into his service. And even if you find yourself going to church every time the doors are open, you can still neglect the church or the message in your own life if you think about other things when you should be concerning or concentrating upon worship or listening to the lesson. You are still guilty of neglect if the services or the message does not move you to become a better person or move you to become more active in the Lord's service. I mean, there are people I know have gone to church for 20, 30, 40 years. Every time the doors opened, but yet their knowledge of the Bible has not increased, and the activity they do really does not help anyone get their soul saved. And so, I mean, they're in trouble. They don't realize it. They think that just going to church all these many years has made them a good person. And hopefully, some has worn off on them and they have become a better person. But I mean, you got to think about that. These are things we have to consider. See, you can tell your children to go to church, but if you do not go, you teach them a lesson that church is not important enough for you to go, so why should they? If you don't go to Bible classes when they're offered, I mean, what are you telling your kids? Hey, Bible, I don't have to learn anything else. I mean, honestly, those who attend Bible classes, they learn a whole lot more about the Bible than just hearing a sermon. And it's beneficial for people who attend Bible classes. And all I find over the years is a lot of people coming up with excuses why they don't go to Bible class. I mean, there's various excuses they use. Some appear to be a little bit valid. But if you neglect the Bible classes, you're hurting your soul, whether you realize it or not. And what happens if you don't teach your children? Well, guess what? The world is going to raise your children. And does the world care about their soul? Absolutely not. And yes, you can turn on the TV channel, find some shows that teach lessons about getting along with others. You can force them to watch Andy Griffith and learn life lessons, or Leave It to Beaver, or some of the old shows, which really they had a moral to go along with their story. And it was one, learn to get along with others. And don't look at race, don't look at social status and stuff like that. And so if you're not teaching them, Satan will. And of course, if that's the case, if you're not teaching them about God and his ways, and that his ways are right, you're raising future atheists, or agnostics at least. I mean, so that's what you're doing. So, folks, you have a great responsibility to train your children. You know, Ephesians 6:4, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I mean, if God is not a part of your life and you don't teach your children to respect God, then they're not going to respect his word. In fact, they probably won't ever read his word unless you get busy and show them how important it is. So if you neglect your soul, think about this. How can you have a positive effect upon others? I mean, you really can't. How can you let your light shine if you are always hiding it? And some people try and do that. Jesus warned about that. You know, let your light shine, but some people, you don't, and common sense says you don't light the candle and put it under a bushel basket. You need to live it out, for it provides light for everybody. So, you know, such behavior does no good for anyone around you. And Jesus tells us that in Matthew 5:16, let our light shine so that others can see our good works and glorify God who is in heaven. So if we fail to do God's word and we fail to set a good example, what will be the result? Well, we should not have to say it, but you will lose your soul. I mean, that's very true. So we already know that there is too much neglect in the important things of life anyway. And so we need to change ourselves to not neglect the really more important things. I mean, so some of this is just common sense. Yeah, it's common sense to realize you got to take care of some things. And our livelihood depends upon it. Our living conditions, everything about us depends upon us taking care of what needs to be taken care of. But when we get down to figure out our soul, so important, and yet so many people neglect it. And that's a real tragedy. And of course, God's not happy. And when you stand before him, you're going to realize that, but it'll be too late. So consider these thoughts, something to think about. Consider neglect and why we should not be neglecting the important things. All right, that's our lesson for today. I encourage you to share this message or at least do something for God. Get on the computer and put down some Bible verses and put it on your page and do that. Some of you are doing it, a lot of you are not. So something you can do for the Lord. You never know who you might touch and who you might get to realize that somebody needs to change their ways. You could be instrumental in helping somebody find the truth. And guess what? God will be proud with you, of you. So consider these thoughts. That's our lesson for today. Lord willing, we'll be back here with another lesson. And tomorrow will be in the Lord's Day, so prepare yourselves to worship God. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.